You know what time it is. You know what time it is.
How firm thy friendship. Oh, how
you know what time it is. I'm brawl with them boys of the fall. You know what time it is. On the ground with a nose for the ball. You know what time it is. Blood, sweat, and them tears for this game. Leaving it all out on the field with no fear for you lames. Yeah, you know what time it is. Come brawl with them boys of the fall. Covered in gray and scarlet, massive, stiff arms to your jaw. We breaking it. We sick of seeing you clowns with the crown. We taking it.
What up, Buckeye and college football nation? Welcome to Pops Pod, where we talk about the ins and outs of recruiting, and you get answers to the questions that you think you know, but you don't. I'm Devin. That's Duke below. That's Daniel. I'm going to let Daniel introduce our other guests that we have here with us tonight. Daniel, go ahead, man.
Man, we got a again, we got a great person, man. And the reason why, I like to bring people like this gentleman on, that you see on the screen right now, man, is because one, great family, right? Doing all the right things, man. Everything's, squeaky clean, no problems with anything, and a guy who's just leading his family in the right directions as far as I'm concerned, right? So I got a lot of respect for the gentleman that we're bringing on tonight. Not only as a father, his son's a baller, but he's also got some expertise that is really in the space of again what we're kind of doing on this program, man. It's just kind of talking to people, giving our advice, what we believe is the right direction to kind of lead your family, man. So again, I want to introduce, man, a great guy, Vernell Brown Jr. If for those who don't know, his son is Vernell Brown III. Absolute baller. Wish we could have got the young man in with us, but I mean, we understand. Every offer in the country, and could have went wherever he wanted to, man. But he decided to, do what he's doing. But again, man, great guy. Want to bring Vernell in and just kind of talk with him and chit chat, just a little bit about his experience about what how his family went through everything, man. So really appreciate you coming on with us tonight, brother.
I appreciate you guys having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, real fast before we dive into it, everybody in the chat, we appreciate you guys. Take this moment, man, before we start diving into this. I'm here to tell you, man, there's going to be some good conversation tonight. We're going to dive into some things that we think we know as fans about the recruiting industry, but we just don't, man. So if you have passion about your team and you have passion about these recruits and what's going on, and you want answers to questions of why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? What's going on, man? It's about to be some good information up in here. So share this on your Xstream, Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Hit that like button. We will not be able to get to too many questions in the chat today. We got some lined up, but put them in there, man. And if Daniel or Duke or anybody else sees them in there, man, they'll pull them out. So get engaged. Get in there and do that. But how's everybody doing tonight? Duke, Daniel, Vernell, everybody doing good?
Doing great.
Great, man. Great.
Doing great.
Blessed by the best, aren't we?
Hey,
Blessed
it's Friday, man.
Yes, sir. Vernell, again, man, just kind of want to, before we kind of get into the meat of what we're doing here, man, just, again, as a couple dads, who've been through this, you have that same experience, man. I don't know if anybody, if everybody knows this about you, man, your legacy all the way through, with not only yourself, your father, and then trickling down to, Vernell III, I say, man, hell, you got a double legacy in the family right now. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, you got a daughter on the track team as well. So, I mean, man, you guys are living it, 100%, man. And, so the first question I just want to ask, man, just, before we get to the professional stuff, man, is just, talk about your experience, just going through this thing as a guy who went through it before, as a guy who had a dad who went through it, and now you're fathering your way through it right now, man.
It's been a hell of a ride, man. To watch a kid, grow up at 5 saying, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. And, for mine, he wanted to play football. Both of my boys wanted to play football, but we're talking about Vernell Brown III in particular. It was a dream of his. You know, I was blessed enough to be in a situation to kind of coach him all the way through until he got to middle school, and that's when I started working back at Florida. And so he started to play for my brother then. And so just to watch all of it materialize and put himself in the position to be one of the top players in the country at his position, to go through the recruiting process was fun for him, fun for our family. You know, it's pretty straightforward because I had worked in college athletics for 5 years, so knew a lot of people, pretty much know people at all the schools that were recruiting him. So his process was pretty straightforward. It took a while to get going just because, you know, guys I knew that worked at other schools would say, man, our coach say he good enough, but everybody think he going to Florida. And one of the things I never wanted to do as a dad, and my wife and I, we strive to not do, even though we're both Gators, is not pigeonhole our kids into Florida.
Right.
We wanted them to make their own decision. My oldest daughter goes to Florida State, by the way. But we were really intentional about making sure everybody understood that this wasn't going to be our decision, and because we're Gators, they were going to go through the process and make their own decision, and ultimately that's what Vernell ended up doing. You know, we visited a lot of schools on unofficials. We went on 4 officials, and ultimately he made the decision to be a Gator, but that was not the case all along. I think, you know, Ohio State was definitely a close second, and then you had Miami and Florida State.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, so that's great that you're talking about that, man. You know, what this is a big thing. You know, man, what does that legacy piece really mean? You know, when you're talking about, you know, something that's, you know, spanned over the generations, like, you know, like for example, like your family. You know, talk about that a little bit.
It means a lot. You know, I actually grew up in Gainesville, so I was born and raised in Gainesville, which is where the University of Florida was. My dad and 2 uncles, my dad, Vernell Brown Sr., my uncle, Johnny L. Brown, and then I had another uncle, Charlie Brown, that all played at Florida during the late 70s, early 80s. And then I played early 2000s. My brother played mid 2000s. And then here we are now. My oldest son's there, my daughter's there, and then my nephew transferred there. So it's a big deal for us to be in one spot on Saturday. You know, everybody living kind of what we grew up watching, which was the University of Florida football. I can remember, you know, going to the youth football games in the afternoon when I was young, and then we come back home, and I mean that morning on Saturday mornings we come back home, and everybody at our house we having a party watching the University of Florida play. So that's always been a big thing. It means a lot for our family, for all the kids to be there, even though that wasn't a thing for us. It didn't matter to me. I'm a dad before I'm anything, so I'm gonna support my kids wherever they at, whether that's Florida or Ohio State or Florida State. It doesn't matter. But it is a big deal to see all of them there and the legacy continue.
And let me ask you this. So, I mean, it's a huge deal. I mean, it's one, you know, you being, you know, alumni, but you know, your dad, you just said your grandfather or your uncle?
2 uncles.
Yeah, two uncles. I mean,
And my
that's
brother.
deep. Like, and I'm the same way. You know, we were the same way. You know, we would let our son, you know, make his decision. But man, did you not feel any type of pressure from, you know, like, hey, come on, man, you gotta, you know, get in his ear? And
You know, I wouldn't do that deep down inside. You know, obviously I was smiling when he decided to choose Florida. But
right.
one of the things I think is important, you know, we all know that this thing can go either way for you. You know, you can have a lot of success where you choose to go, and some people don't have success and find success in other ways.
Right.
So I think it's extremely important as parents. Fortunately for a lot of us, we've been through it, so it's not as big a deal for us. But for some of those parents who hadn't had an opportunity to go through it, they kind of live through the kid a little bit in the process. And I think that's a slippery slope, because one of the things for me I never wanted to happen was my son to make a decision based off of me, my son or my daughters, make a decision based off of what we want them to do, and it not turn out well, and then they're looking at you like it's your fault. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it was my job through the process, because I knew all the ins and outs from playing and working, all that good stuff, just to make sure he understood all the pros and the cons to each situation. You know, when you go on visits, I always encourage kids, take 24 to 48 hours when you come, because it's everybody's job when you go to a campus to roll out the red carpet.
Yep.
So you're going to leave there high, if that makes sense. So after 24 to 48 hours, I think you can do a serious evaluation as an individual and as a family, and you can make a great synopsis on your visit and where they stand in your recruiting process.
Right.
Great stuff, man.
100%.
So just
Vernell,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you along the same lines, man. Not only like as being a legacy parent, right? You want to make sure you're not pressuring your kid to go to that school that you play for, but there's also other decisions that come up for parents along those same lines of, hey, it's a school that you root for, or it's a school you really like, or something. Can you explain a little bit and give us maybe a couple details for fans out there that don't know, even for parents that are going through this for the first time? What are some things that you did to make sure you stayed out of the way? Because that had to be hard. You know what I mean? You went to Florida, two uncles played at Florida, the whole 9 yards. And like you said, secretly you were smiling when he picked Florida. How did you keep that secret smile that you always had inside of you from actually impacting his decision?
Well, I think, kind of holding the same weight as it pertains to all the school. Don't lighten the load just because it's Florida. Make sure you paint the pros and the cons for Florida no different than you will for Ohio State or any other school.
Right.
That was one of my things, and just kind of reiterated, to him that this is your decision. It's not. Don't worry about how I feel, what I think. If you ask me I'm not going to tell you what I think. I want you to organically go through the process, and then if it's whatever school is right for you, you'll land there. If I make sure you understand all the pros and the cons to going there. So that was kind of the big thing, reinforcing that it's your decision, and then just being fair. I'm not going to skew the information because it's Florida, just because I'm a Gator. If there's a negative in Florida, I'm going to make sure he understands that no different than I would with any other university.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
How was the experience of going through it with VB3? That's what I like to call him.
Right.
How's that experience coming? With watching him in what you went through.
In the process, man, it was cool. I'm gonna be honest. I was ready for it to be over because I'm not, once again, I had seen it. So all the whining and dining and stuff that goes on visits, it wasn't fascinating to me. You know what I mean? And so, and I think some schools knew that. He kind of got treated like a transfer to some degree, especially when it got down to it, because you're not gonna wow me and really him with your facilities and this, that, and the other. Every school he was considering had facilities.
Exactly.
So there are certain things that it's just like education. I mean, every school's gonna have a pretty decent education with the options that my son had and you guys' son had. I mean, Ohio State's a hell of a university as it pertains to academics, and so is Florida. So those things are not as important as the other things as to, okay, how do you guys want to use him? Because this is, if his ultimate goal is to play on Sundays, there's a method to getting there. It doesn't just happen overnight. So all the plans for development, both on and off the field. And for my son, he's a pretty different kid academically. He was a 5.0 kid. So he's really in tune to things outside of football. And it was really intentional about asking the questions pertaining to academics, just so he knows what programs they have, what resources they have, and things that they can do to help put him in position after the game is done. So, and that happened at Florida and at every school that we visited. So, that I would say that was really the big thing, man. Just sitting back and kind of letting him go through the process. He's a really smart kid. He knows the questions to ask, and then I'm just taking mental notes while we're there to kind of go over when we go back through the evaluation process.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Great stuff. Man, let's get to it, man. Let's kind of get to what I think is the hot topic right now, man. Elite Sports Management Group. Tell us about it, man. What inspired that? What's the history with that?
So, as I told you guys earlier, from 2018 to 2023, I was senior director of player development and alumni relations at Florida, and then I was also our pro liaison. So, I dealt with pretty much everything off the field. Obviously, I'm a football guy, but what I was concerned with is more the guys' development off the field and helping them navigate through the process. Because everybody that played, regardless of what sport you play, there's some challenges along the way when you get to the collegiate level. We all dream to want to play there, but for some people, your career take off immediately. For some, it take a couple years. It was a different world. So. They're just, kind of helping guys, being a pillar in the building that, guys can relate to, and they understand that I understand not only the game of football, but how all of this stuff ties into your life after football. And so kind of being in that role, And then, you know, helping, I obviously touched everybody, but there were a few guys in particular, Anthony Richardson being one of them, that I worked really closely with. And, you know, he kind of asked would I transition with him. Ultimately talked to my family about that and made the decision to do so. And that's kind of what sparked Elite Sports Management Group. You know, one of the things we strive to do with our company is kind of help athletes and families navigate the different challenges that life and performing at a high level throws at you. And you know, making sure you maximize in all areas. You know, there are a lot of sports agents out there, and you know, the main function of them is to, you know, make sure you're taken care of from an NIL collective and GM space, and we do that. However, I think what separates us from most of these other companies is we actually understand the process of the transitions. We understand how it all plays in and how, you know, you don't let money be the deciding factor of where you go. You got to look at the situation, because one of the things I tell all our guys is regardless of how much money we can get you in NIL, it's still little money compared to if you go put yourself in position to be drafted in the top 15 3 to 5 years later. So you got to keep that in mind when making a decision. And so I think we're a little different from almost every agency in the marketplace.
It's yeah. So I have a different, you know, perspective on, you know, agents in the collegiate NIL space, and all of that is mostly based off of guys not like you. You know what I mean? They don't have a lot of experience. I feel like they're a lot more predatory, trying to you know, oh, it's an opportunity to make some money off the kid, and they don't have the kid's best interest in hand. You know, it's more, oh, I want to get you the biggest deal so I can get paid the most, right? So, you know, with that in mind, yeah, I have a similar background as you, you know, having a little, you know, understanding of the business. My mind was, hey, you don't need an agent right now, you know, in college with, you know, all the infrastructure that they have, you know, at these big institutions, you know, as far as, you know, helping kids and parents navigate that space. What do you what would you tell a parent, you know, who says, oh, I need an agent?
So I think it depends on the kid. However, one of the things I'm big on is you want the player coach and the parent coach relationship to stay authentic. And so that's why I think it's extremely important now that we live in the space, in the NIL space where it's a business. I think it's extremely important to have representation so you can maintain that. I think, you know, none of this stuff is personal, even though sometimes parents can take it personal when, you know, school A only want to offer their son X and school B offering them, you know, Z. I think it can get personal, and so to prevent that from happening, I think it's important to have some representation that can have those tough conversations with school is not going to take it personal. They understand the business, they understand the marketplace, they understand the market value. And that would be my suggestion. I think, can a parent do it if you have knowledge of it? Maybe. But you know, I think it's extremely important to keep those relationships from player coach, parent coach, and even just parent organization as authentic as possible. So that's why I think you should have representation.
100%. Okay.
So Vernell, obviously this, you know, obviously you got the NFL, right? Agents been around for a while. So players that are coming into the NFL, they have other players and experience that they can lean on and say, okay, what agents are good? What, you know, how do I do this and all that? So there's a lot of history there that knowledge can be gained from. This college football thing now with NIL, it's a little bit different, man. There's really nobody overseeing this thing. It's not like the NCAA has a criteria for who can be an agent and who can't be an agent. So for first-time players and for first-time parents going through the process, two questions, man. Number one, how do they know whether, you know, how do they know who to go to? And how do they know they're going to need an agent? You know what I mean? So because I'm sure they're going to have a lot of people coming to them saying, I can be your agent. I can be your agent. I can be your agent. And there's not a list you can pull up on the internet that say, hey, these are the certified agents to use in the college realm right now. So do you have some advice for how parents and players can navigate that?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the NFL, and I'm a certified NFL PA agent also, but I think the spaces are kind of different. You know, the NFL space is more of definitely strictly business. You know what I mean? The collegiate space, on the other hand, I think all of those other things that I talked about and mentioned earlier, they are extremely important. And when you're in your interview process, those are the things. If all the agent is talking about is dollars and cents, he's probably not the right guy for the collegiate space. Because there's a lot more mentorship. There's a lot of other things like just navigating just day-to-day life things that are going to be more important and help free up the athlete's mind for him to be able to maximize on the field. And so I think when you're looking for an agent in the high school and collegiate space, I think you got to take that into consideration. Even if you got a player who has, you know, a knowledgeable, you know, educated mom, educated dad, so forth and so on. Sometimes players need to hear it from somebody else. You know, they hear us all the time. There's some dads and moms, they can parent their kid all the way until they're 40. You know what I mean? And the kid will listen. But there are a lot of cases where that's not the case. And so sometimes hearing it from someone else, I think kind of makes it stick with a player. And you know, when you interview guys, you know, you can kind of tell who's authentic and who's not. I mean, I mean, at least for me, I can, and I'm pretty sure you guys can attest to that also. So I think going through that interview process is extremely important. And then, you know, if I think the big time guys, you know, the top players in the country, I think all of those guys, you know, need agents. But if if your kid is up and coming, I think you can have some conversations. But I think you can kind of scare a lot of schools off if Johnny hadn't quite arrived yet, you know, as being a big time guy, but you already have an agent. So I think that can definitely scare some schools away. So I think you just you got to kind of use some common sense, and if not, just you find people who you think or who you've talked to and heard are credible in the space, and you reach out and you have conversations.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, Vernell. What one of the things you just said was just like, you know, they may not know when it's time. Right. You know what I mean? So talk about some of the things that are going to be, you know, factors, you know, bullet points to let somebody, you know that, hey, look, it's time to start looking at these things.
I think one of the big things is, you know, for me, I like for the recruiting process for all the guys up under our umbrella to be as authentic as possible. So I want you to go through your visits, so forth and so on, get a top 5, a top 10, and then we can start having the money conversations. You know what I mean? Because it's almost impossible when you're dealing with a 17, 18-year-old kid and a lot of families who's never had money for the process not to be skewed once money gets involved. So I think, you know, if you can get your top schools together as you kind of finalizing that, and you know the money conversation is going to start, and you've had schools kind of bring up that conversation, then I think that's when you can kind of start to look at, okay, maybe I want to have representation here to kind of help make sure we maximize here. But if you just taking visits and going around and seeing schools and this, that, and the other, I don't think it's necessarily, you know, I don't think it's necessary unless you're like a big time guy. And like I say, even for the big time guys, you narrow it down before those conversations even start.
Yeah,
man, it's you are I mean, like for me, you know, are the dream agent. I mean, because you sound just like Daniel and I, and you know how we, you know, approach our kid, and you know, whoever is going to touch him and be in his, you know, be in his life. We want to keep everything as authentic as possible. Right. And the only way you can do that is to, you know, have an inside, you know, view and experience to be able to, you know, articulate that and understand and navigate that with the parent. Right. So, you know, they're going to, you know, receive that in a way that they know you're truly, you had their best.
He's going to pull,
and it's refreshing here. I was jaded, and you know, as far as like agents go, and I'm like, nah, I'm not. But I mean, just listening to you now, I'm like, just like the same way, you know, we chose a school. Right. Like, okay, this is somebody that, you know, I can pass off. You know, we can pass off as mom and dad to look after our kid, right. And you know, in his best interest, and you know, and trust that, you know, he'll do the right thing for him. Right. You know, and it's super refreshing to hear, man.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's important, and just knowing what I know about the NIL space and the different things that I see from, different guys that I talk to, so forth and so on. I think it's a lot more bad than good right now,
I
in
know.
the space. But I
Absolutely.
think it's extremely important to kind of find who the good guys are, promote them, so kids can,
Yeah.
make sure they have people who genuinely care about them and their well-being, and not
Mhm.
just driven by trying to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when you have a business, money is a part of it, but money shouldn't be the deciding factor for anything.
Right.
Where you fit.
Speaking of that, I do have just a follow up question. So, I was learning about the difference between. Well, I know with NFL agents, typically anywhere from 1 to 3%, and
Mhm.
then when I found out what these the fees were for agents in the collegiate space, and why they can charge what they charge, I'm like, I think this I think it's highway robbery. I mean,
Right.
because they can say it's coming from it's a marketing contract, so we can
Right.
charge 15 to 20%, and I'm like, okay, so if I'm a certified agent and have
Mhm.
aspirations of keeping this client, what's the middle ground in that fee space?
So I mean, I think it's different depending upon the athlete. Like if you got like a high, I mean, marketing deals, and we don't see marketing deals, well, collective deals as marketing deals. So we don't view it that way.
Okay,
Just so you know.
that's good.
But in the marketing space, I think anywhere between 15 and 20% is the going rate.
Okay.
However, in the NIL space, I think anywhere from 5 to 10% is
Mhm.
where you should be, and
Okay.
that should be across the board.
Yeah.
And the reality of it, majority of these guys, they're not gonna make a lot of money in the marketing. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's only a small percentage of guys who are gonna kill it in marketing.
100%.
So as an agency, just because if he's making 10 grand, you shouldn't take 15 to 20% of that money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
there may be some people that get upset about that, and I don't care. I
That's
just
fine.
know how
Yeah.
I operate. But
Right.
I think 5 to 10% should be the across the board deal in the
Yeah.
NIL space.
And that's
Makes
fair.
enough
I
sense.
mean, that goes to if you have the kid's best interest in hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That
so
makes sense.
Vernell, I got a question for you, man, because you brought up how the NFL agents, they operate differently, and college football's different now with nil and stuff, and it's also different in the sense of the relationships that these recruits have. They got relationships with their parents, they have relationships with their trainers, they have relationships with their coaches. You being somebody on that other end of that, on the agent side of it, on the management side of it, what does that relationship look like, from in terms of in the college world, from an agent or a manager to a player, when you're dealing with that many different dynamic relationships, from a growing young man who's, it's different when you're dealing with an adult. Their relationships are a little different. They can say, hey, I don't want this relationship in my life, and it's gone. When you're dealing with kids, there's a lot of different dynamic relationships that are involved in it. So how do you handle that, and what does that look like from agent to recruit?
So I think you have to have the conversation to establish yourself with not only the family but with the athlete also. Just to make sure they understand what your purpose is, and that's to help you navigate whatever. So like I have a phone, all my guys know that phone is on ring 24 hours a day. If anything come up, give me a call. And then just checking in on their, because they all go through changes. I mean, when kids get to campus, a lot of them, it's the first time they're away from their family. They're in a totally different city, they're by themselves. So kind of being that person that kind of checks in on them, whether it's via phone, via text, knowing that they have you, if nothing else. Some things that they may share with you, they may not want to share with their parents. You know what I mean? So keeping that relationship open with the player as well as the family. I think you have to kind of use your discretion as an agent as to the things that, okay, Johnny told me this, but I might not need to share that with mom and dad. I'm gonna help Johnny navigate that because it's not anything that's gonna be detrimental to him. You know what I mean? It's just life, developing and transitioning in life and becoming a young man and maybe dealing with an issue. We're gonna help him navigate that until it starts to look like it's going left, and then we're going to involve the family. And before we involve the family, we're going to let him know we're going to involve the family, and here's why. So I just think, no different than everything else I've talked about, just being authentic, man. That's what sustains the relationships. And when during my time at Florida as a player development, those are the things that keep kids coming in your office.
Yeah.
When they know they're gonna get authentic answers,
Yeah.
there's nothing in it for you other than to help them navigate. You just want to see them be the best version of themselves every day. That's it. And that thought process doesn't change when you leave player development and get into the agent space. It's still the same. To me, being an agent is player development.
Right.
Great stuff.
Yeah, man, that speaks to the difference you talked about. It's, NFL, business, college, there's not an emotional contract you can sign with your college athletes. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it sounds like you're navigating through all that. The trust has to be built.
Absolutely.
If you're going to be an agent for a college, athlete, the trust has to be built big time between you and that athlete, you and the family, and you and anybody else that is involved in their life, because you're outside of the business realm. Now you're getting more towards, all right, this is family type in this gentleman's life, this stage in his life. Normally family or mentors that he's known for a long time are helping him with these situations. And here you come, not knowing him very long, but you've got to build that rapport rather quickly to be able to gain that trust, so the parents can trust you to help him along this process. So, congrats to you, man. And that's a tough thing to navigate through, I'm sure. But it's also, I'm sure, very, very gratifying, man, when you get to see these kids with smiles on their faces, man.
Yeah. It is very much so. I don't think I want to be doing anything else, man. I mean, it
Yeah,
is. There's not a day I wake up where it feels like work. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it was the same when I worked at the University of Florida. There's not a day. The hardest part about my job was getting there. When I'm in the building, I love everything about that I was doing. It never feels like work.
That's how you know what you're calling.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Vernell, talk a little bit about how, again, we're just talking average everyday people, man, people that are going through this process, hope to go through this process, man. How does somebody, we talked about when we kind of identify, how they identify these things, man. How does a family, who's figured out, hey, look, my kid's doing well, we're getting offers, we're taking these visits, we've been to camps, we've been through the process, right? Now we're on this track now. How do we go about finding gentlemen like yourself and fostering those relationships, getting that thing started?
Well, I think you got to look at, the first thing I would do is look at parents. I mean, you guys know, none of us knew each other before our son started going through the recruiting process.
Right.
And so once that started, we all got a chance to, shake hands at different events, so forth and so on, get a chance to meet each other, whether it's at, a top player event or an official visit or an unofficial visit. And so I think just talking to different people in that space, maybe, some within your class, maybe some that was in the class before yours, so 2026, maybe you can talk to a few 2025 parents and say, hey, what did you guys do? How did you do it? So forth and so on. Who do you recommend? And I think it's always good to sit down with more than one person. If somebody knew me, I would encourage anybody, even if you knew me and, knew my credibility in the space, know what I stand for, I still would encourage you to interview somebody else just because. Even if you know right then you want to sign with me, because you don't understand what someone brings to the table if all you know is what they're telling you. Whereas if you go talk with somebody else, you'll see, well, wow, man, he's a lot different from that person. You know what I mean? And I think that's what kind of gets you kind of thinking, okay, this guy can really help my son at this level. You know what I mean? And so that's what I would do to a parent whose kid is there. Just talk to some other people. I mean, there's a lot. We all live in the world of social media. I mean, I'm pretty sure this will be on social media. You can look at a bunch of different stuff and do your own research to see kind of who's credible. And then on top of that, you can kind of confirm it by talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Vernell, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here a little bit, man. But I know you got this, dude. So, obviously, boom, how do we find you? Okay. Let's say I'm a college athlete. I found you, called a buddy. Parents said, hey, man, call this dude. He's real good. what's the process like? When I pick this phone up, give you a call, hey, Vernell, my name's Devin, you know, I'm a 4-star athlete, whatever. What's that process look like? Does it take a couple more phone calls of building relationships? Does it depend on each individual basis? What's this process like for these young men?
So on that initial call, you know, for us, we just kind of, you know, get the basic information. If we don't know the kid, which most of these kids we'll already be familiar with, we kind of just get an idea of the situation. And then once we get an idea of the situation, I've always, you know, obviously at the end of the day in the NIL space, even though you may be dealing with young adults, the families are still involved. So I would always then go set up a Zoom or even a meeting with the family as well as the athlete just to kind of navigate. Because the reality of it is I'm probably not for everybody. You know what I mean? Like I operate a certain way and it's for the benefit of the athlete and the family. And if you don't see that, if you know enamored by all this other stuff that in my opinion doesn't matter, then we're probably not the best fit for you. So I think having that initial meeting and so everybody's on the same page is extremely important. So that's kind of how you start that conversation. That conversation happens with whoever reaches out to you. Whether most of the time it's the parent, it's not the athlete, but sometimes it is the athlete. But you want to get everybody together and kind of pitch everybody as to what my company brings to the table versus everybody else, and then kind of let them put the ball in their court and let them make the decision.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, man. Go ahead, Devin. Go ahead.
I was real fast. Just got a couple questions from people in the chat, man. One of our watchers, he's got two. I pulled one up earlier. I'll just ask you both of them. How many agents are there in the college NIL world right now? And then also, do agents help get other sponsors after like the NIL is done? Do you guys stay with them and help them through their other opportunities they might get as well?
So there is no database at the moment that you can say how many agents are there.
Wow.
That's just the short answer to that question. So I don't know how many NIL agents out there. I just know I'm one of them, and I'm certified NFLPA, so forth and so on. But I can't give a number on how many agents are out there. You know, different agencies sell different things as it pertains to the marketing piece. I'll be the first to tell you, if you're looking for marketing, you may want to go hire a marketing company. That's not what I specialize in, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you or your family that that's what we do. Now we'll help you navigate the issue, the opportunities that come, but as far as going to get them, that's not what we do. We can help you find a marketing company to do that if that's something that you're interested in. But the reality of it is, if you go do what you're supposed to do, those deals will find you.
Yeah.
Amen.
Right. Man, before Devin asks his last question, man, I kind of wanted to, and he kind of prefaced into where I want to go with this, man. Let's just go to the other side of the game, the dirty side of the game. So let's just, I'll just ask, man, you know, we hear this all the time. You know, some people think it's a filthy word. Some people don't know that, you know, some of these phone calls that they may get from said person are, you know, some of these actors, man. So I'm just going to ask, you know, and you can give me your short and sweet answer, you know, or you can rip this thing up, man. What is a street agent, brother? What is it? What are they doing?
That's a great question, man. And there's a really simple answer to what a street agent is. All right. Anyone claiming to represent athletes in the recruiting or NIL space without credentials, knowledge of the high school and collegiate space rules and regulations at both levels, especially pertaining to the transitions, and then, you know, and the changes that have been made and are currently on the horizon to be made here with the house settlement, man. Anyone that's not knowledgeable of those things, they're street agents, in my opinion. It doesn't matter what the title is.
And I would like to add, and they're trying to steer you to a particular
Absolutely. And here's the reality of that, though. There are some agents that are out there doing it. You know what I mean? So I that is a huge piece, and I think as parents and as an athlete, you know, this process should always be about you, right? It shouldn't be about me. It shouldn't be about, you know, this person, that person. It's about you. And when people start trying to push you to schools, then it's about them. And I think the first sign you see that's a red flag, and grab the baton and run. would be my advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vernell, got a very important question, man. Might be the toughest one of the night, dude. If you had to pick one meal to eat the rest of your life, dude, over and over and over again, what's your go-to, man? What are you going to?
Ooh, I'm gonna probably say seafood.
Yeah, seafood.
Yeah, and I don't have to get specific if I just say seafood. So I might eat crab, I might eat shrimp, but just seafood. That would be my deal.
Gotcha. But no, serious note now, you know, Daniel brought up the dirty side of this business, and, you know, I can sit back as a fan, just watches. I don't really have a lot of inside on this game, but can you put it into perspective? And you know, you got more than I do, at least, but can you put it in perspective? How much is this going on, man? How much is this taking place in college football right now? Is it a really, really big deal? Or are we just talking about there's a couple guys out there coming up? Where are we at with this thing right now?
Nah, it's a huge deal, and the scope of it is very wide. So it's not just people claiming to be agents. It's trainers who get approached by an agency, and not a trainer trying to push the kid to sign with this agency because there's a kickback on the backside for the trainer. So it's a dirty world, man, and the net is very broad. You know, what I would encourage players and families to do is just be careful, man, because it's a lot. If the baseline thought process for me would be if the process ever stopped being about me, then I need to find somebody different to deal with.
Right.
Is there anywhere to go for people to report these agents that try to take advantage of people? You know, in the NFL, obviously it can't happen. You know what I mean? You got the NFL, whatever agencies watching over, you had to become certified to be an NFL agent. So, you know, the NCAA is not doing it. Is there anywhere that people have to go, or is it just you better make sure you make the right decision?
Yeah. How are people, you know, trying to protect themselves from getting, you know, snared into some of these things?
Yeah.
So the reality of it is there is nowhere. There's no governing body right now in the agent space when it comes to NIL. So you just got to be careful. You got to ask questions and deal with people who are genuine in all aspects. I think when you do that, you're less likely to run into the issue where somebody getting a kickback or this, that, and the other, man. People who understand the space and just genuine people, those are the people you want your kid to be around, not only at this level, but even at the next level.
Right.
I just think that's extremely important, man. The good people are hard to find. When you find them, ride with them.
And Vernell, I mean, you mentioned it, you know, like multiple times, and it's a good way. I mean, that how I would, you know, identify somebody that's going to have my best interest is someone who has skin in the game, right? So if you are a licensed, as Vernell is, NFL agent, you have skin in the game, right? And if I want to continue this relationship, I'm going to have this athlete's best interest in hand. So if you don't know anything or you're confused about anything, I'm going to go with the agent who is certified in the NFL.
Correct.
And is in the and is in the collegiate space, because they want to maintain that relationship. That's how I would choose an agent for my son, you know, in this space. Right.
I think that piece is extremely important. I think, you know, the thing too, though, like I said, I bring back the actual mentorship piece, because a lot of the bigger agencies who, you know, they want the relationship, and in some cases they may even do the NIL stuff for free. But it's just they're signing the kid 100%. And they just trying to maintain a relationship, but they're not there for all those challenging times, so forth and so on. So I think you kind of got to be careful in that space too.
Why would somebody want to sign a kid for free, Vernell? Talk about that.
Because their overall goal is to represent that same kid when he transitions to the NFL.
100%.
And that would only happen for high-level athletes. It won't happen for most. But the high-level athletes, you'll have the bigger agencies who want to represent those kids for nothing. And they sign them. And, you know, a lot of the kids and the families are fascinated by, you know, I signed with such and such and such and such and such and such as my agent. And it sounds good, but are they going to really be able to give you what you need in order to help maximize your collegiate career, to make sure you have an opportunity to go play on Sunday? And in a lot of cases,
there are pros and cons to that, right? And I get it from a business perspective. That makes sense, right? Yeah, I'll you know, give this, you know, offer this service because I have the bandwidth to do it, right? in order to, get the relationship down the end,
Right.
when they turn pro. But the con is you're just a number,
Exactly.
like to your point. So it's you really have to, do your due diligence, like when it comes to that. And,
Absolutely.
I would err on the side of a smaller agency who knows me, personally, and, has the bandwidth to, deal with, the little stuff and not pass me off to, a lesser or underling, so
Right.
to speak.
Absolutely.
Man, Mello is brought up something in the chat, and Mello is one of the one of Devin's co-hosts. Man, he was on with us last week. Great guy, man. Mello just last week, Duke and I, congratulated Mello because his daughter is going to be signing, scholarship to play soccer here. So congratulating Mello again, man, for becoming part of the family. As far as dads who have scholarship athletes out there. Again, I on this Pops Pod thing, we're football dads, but again, we understand that there's so much different things going on, man. There's guys in different sports. We all got daughters. So I mean, where do you see things going for female athletes, man? And that was one of the questions that I had, as we kind of get closer to wrapping this thing up. Vernell, just in your own expertise, man, where do you see things going for female athletes? Like when you're talking about things like Title IX and revenue sharing, as it's going to be coming up here soon.
Well, I think the females are gonna get paid too, no different than the players. I mean, the players on the football, the basketball, the other side. I think they'll get paid, and I think they can have representation also. I mean, my company doesn't mind representing females. We're certified in the NIL space, so we can represent males and females. But I do think there's in certain sports they're already getting paid, like women's basketball, so forth and so on. They're getting paid. So I think no different than the advice I would give to a football athlete, it would be the same for a basketball or a soccer, a female basketball or soccer athlete when money's involved. I think it's the same deal. You need the same approach. You need to have good people around you, and the money may not be the same. However, keeping that authentic parent coach player coach relationship, I think that's extremely important.
Hey, one last question. Yeah, I totally forgot. I would like to get your get your opinion on the transfer portal and an agent's role in, like, because from my mind, I'm thinking, there's agents that kind of plant a seed that's not there and ends up ruining that relationship, or because they see an opportunity to get more money somewhere else.
Right.
A kid or family's not even thinking about it, and they may say, hey, they're fielding calls from schools. Like, what's your opinion on on the transfer portal and the agent's role in that decision making?
So I think the transfer portal is a healthy thing for our athletes.
For sure.
However, as an agent, you shouldn't be pushing that if it's money driven. You know what I mean? Like if you have a player that's somewhere and he buried on the depth chart, then okay, you might bring it up. But just for him to try to get a little bit more money from this school or leverage one school, like that's when, to me, when I talk about the process not being about you, that's when the process is not about you, and that's just happening. So I think once again, going back to that, whenever the process stops being about you and about somebody else, I think you got the wrong person.
Yeah.
So
I knew the answer. I just wanted that, on that topic to be reiterated, because
Absolutely.
a lot of people have that that process confused, and they're placing blame here, placing blame there, and a lot of times it's just they're getting the wrong guidance from the wrong people.
Absolutely.
And like a coach would say, they don't know what they don't know,
Right.
and it ends up ruining. Because a lot of money sounds like a good thing to somebody who doesn't come from it. So, oh yeah, that is a good opportunity, but you have to factor in the position they play, their role on the team, and all of that. And I feel like you again, your experience and background have a unique insight into that, into guiding parents in that discussion with with teams.
I think you have to keep your eye on what the overall goal is. And the overall goal for majority of these high level kids is to play on Sundays.
100%.
And so it doesn't do you no good to leave 800,000 to go get $1 million over here, but you're not playing or you're not in a system that benefits you or promotes you to be able to get an opportunity to play on Sunday.
Right.
And so all money is not good money, and regardless of how much money we get you in NIL money, it still doesn't compare to if you go put yourself in position to be drafted in the top 15. There are certain things that you can live by, and it'll help you with a lot of these decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those decisions
Vernell,
are realized once you get to that level. When you're in them interviews, and that's all going to come back, and you're going to have to articulate yourself in that room by yourself. You know why you made that decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Vernell, I got a final question for you, man. It's a little bit of a spicy question, so I don't expect you to get into it too deep or anything. But you hear, it's regards to the transfer portal, you hear this tampering word going around, right? And a lot of people are saying, well, coaches can just go to high school coaches and of that player and say, hey, go see if they're interested, hopping in the portal, let them know. For example, Ohio State's interested in them. And then the other one that gets brought up is agents. You know, people are saying that agents can kind of be that middleman to eliminating that NCAA violation or whatever. Is that something that's going on? You just kind of hit on that in regards to, hey, man, don't make it about yourself. Don't make it about money. If the player wants in the portal, he'll come to his agent and say, get in the portal. But we just talked about the dark side of this thing. Is that something that you think is going on? Do you believe it to be an issue, like some people bring it up to be?
I mean, I'm pretty sure it happens. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, here's the other part of that. There are friendships in this now, and I'm not talking about player. Like, I know a lot of coaches everywhere. You know what I mean? I worked in college athletics. I played with a lot of guys. I mean, I know people everywhere, and those conversations don't just come. Like, people may not just call you about that conversation. It may just come up, you know, in conversation. So I don't think there'll ever be a way that you can kind of stop that. But I think it's on the player and the family to just make sure they have the right representation, where even if something like that was to happen, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Amen.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're where you are and everything's working well and you feel like you're being compensated well, then why do we need to go to school B?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, again, man, you know, part of what we're doing with this thing, man, is you know, trying to show, talk, and just, you know, give as much. Again, man, we're just having conversations. You know, we're just talking with people, man, and just showing, you know, what it's like to go through these things, man, and you know how these things affect not only the players but their families as well, man. So I want to end with one last thing here, Vernell. You know, as we're going through this, and you brought this up at the very beginning, that, you know, is what we were talking about, man. You know, again, we're three dads who got sons that are doing this. We've been through this. It was a topic that we kind of brought up last week, and this is a big thing. What's going on, you know, with the draft, you know, just being a little bit behind us, man. So, you know, and I'm sure, you know, everybody kind of, you know, the hot topic, you know, I think been this week has been, you know, the Shedeur Sanders kind of talk, and his status is where he's been drafted at, man. And I have my own personal thoughts on why things may have transpired the way they have for him, but I want you to kind of touch on, man, you know, again, from your own perspective. Duke and I have kind of talked about this before, but you know, again, man, I'd like for people to kind of hear your thoughts on this, man. As a dad who's been through this, man, you know, you walk the walk, and now you're watching your son kind of begin his walk, right? How do you pull yourself back from that situation, man, and allow your son to become the man that he needs to be?
Well, I think that's an easy answer too. My time is over, right? It's his time. And so what I want to be as a dad and even as an agent is a resource. You know what I mean? I want you to navigate the process, and you use me as a resource when something come up that you don't understand, something you need clarification on, something you need guidance on. And I say guidance. I'm not going to make a decision for you. I'm going to give you guidance and give you information and allow you to make the decision. And so, I think when you're transitioning from in college, all our kids went through the recruiting process. So, everybody laid out the red carpet for our sons and our families when we came, so forth and so on. The difference between the collegiate space and the NFL space is it's a job interview in the NFL space. And so you're not being recruited, you're being interviewed. And so you have to be able to navigate that, change gears, and understand how to promote and sell yourself, because ultimately that's what you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to talk about a lot of the issues or problems that you've had during your collegiate career, if you had some. And I think it's on the representation to kind of help them address those issues in a positive light. They were negatives, but you can turn negatives into positives. And so there's a lot of things that go into preparing kids for that next process of transitioning to the NFL, for the combine and the interviews and all that stuff. But I think the biggest thing you have to remember, you're being interviewed, not recruited.
Right.
Man, hell of a word, man. Hell of a way to finish that up, man.
For sure.
Yeah, Vernell, it's been mentioned several times that there's really nobody overseeing this. This is so new in college football, and that's what I love about Daniel and Duke's heart behind this show, and it's to give guidance to these parents and to these recruits that just get thrown into this thing and just start trusting the first person that comes up and says, I got your back. You know what I mean? You got to vet these people. You got to build a relationship with them, and you got to know, man, because everything is different. You can't get on the internet and research what is a good college nil agents. It's not there yet. There's not a resource for these parents that have no idea. There's not a resource for these kids that don't have a support group to navigate through this. And those kids just get stuck with whoever, unfortunately, in some situations, whoever's greedy hands want to get in there and find an opportunity to make some bank. That's just the reality. It's not always a bad story. I'm sure there's people out there that help kids with no support group the correct way. But so that's why I love the heart behind this show that these two created. I love you coming on here and joining, man. This is a very insightful show, much needed, man. Everybody in the chat loved it. So, Duke or Daniel, do you guys got anything you guys want to add, before I wrap this thing up?
Go ahead.
Man, I mean, I've learned a lot. And it's open, broadened my perspective to agents and their role in the NIL space. Now I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise and experience. And listen, I would love to have you on often. There are a lot of parents, and I'm sure Daniel gets the same thing, that have these questions and really don't understand needing and not needing an agent, what they need and where their kids are, and to share this information on this topic particularly will
Man, keep freezing up on us, man.
Very valuable. Very valuable. Tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, man.
I froze. Yeah,
you froze.
Y'all got the gist of what I said.
Well, we got it, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's all good, man. Again, man, Vernell, man. I want to kind of double down on what Duke says, man. I want to go ahead and extend an invitation, man, to you anytime you want to come back and talk, man. Man, you are more than welcome to, brother. We love it. Man, we'd love to have you back, man. Like I say, we really appreciate you coming on, man, and just sharing your time with us, man. We really do, man. Really do.
I appreciate you guys having me, man. I'm an open book. I love sharing information. Like I say, my thing in this is I just want to see all of the kids maximized, man. That's it. That's it. If that's what warms my heart, it makes me happy. So I'm an open book, man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, these guys love to have. I would too. I only got like 47 more questions I didn't get to ask. So if you come back on, man, we're ready to roll, man. But on that note, chat, we appreciate you guys. Amazing show tonight, guys. It went great. Don't forget to share this on your X, Instagram, Twitter, the whole 9 yards. Get the word out there, man. let people know there's a place they can go, learn some information from some genuine guys that their heart's in the correct place. Hard to find in this world. On that note, man, Vernell, I know that your son went to Florida. You played at Florida, but we end this show, you know, a little bit of a kind of wild way. You don't have to say IO, you know what I mean? But we gonna do it. You know what I'm saying, dude? So, on that note, appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Go Buckeyes. OH.
Appreciate you guys, man.
IO.
Hey, Vernell, tell